I am so excited to introduce this next lady because I actually had the great good fortune of taking her rewrite class last summer. And I have to say, if you ever get a chance to study with Pilar Alessandra, you owe it to yourselves and to your careers. She is charming, she is smart, she is so knowledgeable about the business. She's absolutely amazing. So, here's her bio. Pilar Alessandra is the director of the popular LA Writers Studio On the Page. She has worked for studios and production companies such as DreamWorks, Image Movers, Radar Pictures, and SNL Studios, and has trained writers at ABC Disney, MTV Nickelodeon, the National Screen Institute, the Los Angeles Film School, the UCLA Writers Program, and more. Her students and clients have written for Lost, Prison Break, Nip Tuck, and Family Guy. They've sold features and pitches to Warner Brothers, DreamWorks, Disney, and Sony, and have won prestigious contests such as the Nickel Fellowship and the Austin Screenwriting Competition. Pilar was named Cream of the Crop in Creative Screenwriting Magazine's Script Consultant Directory, featured as one of LA Weekly's top 100 people. Her book, The Coffee Break Screenwriter, is published by Michael Weiss. Pilar's weekly podcast On the Page can be found on iTunes. Ladies and gentlemen, my great pleasure to introduce Pilar Alessandra.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out so early. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about dialogue, okay? And on screen, what talking about dialogue means is really talking about power play, okay? On-screen dialogue is a power play. We have two characters that want something, they just happen to be using dialogue to get it. Okay? So what we have to think about is, well, how are they going to use these words to get what they want? Okay, dialogue is what they're doing, but what is their dialogue strategy? Okay, people don't just talk on screen, that would be boring. Q&A, dull. Interview, dull. So instead, we have to think about the strategy that they employ. And I'll tell you right up front, one strategy that we always tend to use as adults is lying. Whether we're on screen or in person in real life, we lie a lot. But it's a happy lie. You know, oh my gosh, it's great to see you. You look great, right? We lie all the time. Okay? Because we're civilized people. That's what adults have learned how to do. They lie, right? So lying is a strategy. It is a verbal strategy. So I'm going to write that down here with my terrible handwriting. All right. Lying. There you go. Verbal strategy. Can you give me another verbal strategy? Yes. Pleading. Does pleading have, is it double E or EA? Yeah. No, again, writing teacher who can't spell, that's lovely. All right, pleading, lying, pleading. Tell me another verbal strategy. Manipulating, right? But remember, this verbal strategy is about manipulating somebody. So let's find a way that they can manipulate somebody.
Intimidation.
Intimidation. Okay, so would you maybe say threatening if it's verbal?
Yeah.
Okay, threatening. Threatening. Tell me another one. Yes?
Using foul language.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Cursing? Maybe. Why not? Tell me more.
Voice pitch.
Okay, pitch. All right, let's think of something that is emotional rather than physical, because cursing, pitch, it's very, very specific to language. Okay, well, we've got lying. I'm going to give you another one. This is used in my house all the time. Joking. Okay, talk about manipulation. Give me another verbal strategy.
Accusing.
Accusing. Anything else?
Charming.
Charming. Or flirting, perhaps?
Sympathy.
I'm sorry? Sympathy. Okay. Empathizing.
Yeah.
Right? Empathizing. Okay, now we talked about lying, sometimes truth-telling is an interesting verbal strategy because when you do it, it's so shocking. Okay? Things like, I love you. Whoa, oh my God, who said that? Right? And in romantic comedy, it takes 2 hours to get to that. Okay? So truth-telling can be an interesting shift in a dialogue-driven scene. Okay? Because suddenly, if somebody pulls out the truth, you know that the story is going to move forward because people don't do that. I love you. I'm going to kill you. Okay? Both of those things, they're powerful. That's why we don't use them a lot. Okay? So truth-telling. I guess truth-telling, another way to say that would be honesty. I think it's early in the morning. And then all of these are verbal strategies. But as writers, you know that you're always playing with the white space, right? Between the lines. So what is the ultimate verbal strategy?
Silence.
Silence. Which is actually a non-verbal strategy. Silence. The person who controls the silence usually has the power in the scene. So, if you are looking to do a rewrite of a thriller, okay, less is more, right? Let's have people not say what they're thinking or what they mean, and let the other person squirm and watch the tension build. Or if it's a comedy and you want to create awkwardness, take away some lines. Okay, so silence can be incredibly powerful. So we have all these really great verbal strategies, and I know that you probably will think of a million more. What we're going to do now is switch for a second to agenda. Okay? Remember, characters come in, and it's a power play, and they're using dialogue to get what they want. So let's first think about what they want. Okay? As somebody who reads a lot of scripts, I have read a lot of date scenes. And I have to tell you, I hate date scenes because in my day, I was on enough bad dates, I really don't want to be on yours. And the reason that date scenes tend to be something that's not interesting for me to read is because they tend to be the same thing, an exchange of information. Now, in real life, this is sometimes what we do. Oh, where did you go to school? I went to school over there. Really? What do you do for a job? Oh, that's interesting. Where'd you grow up, right? All that stuff, okay? But on screen, think about what the camera is on. Two people exchanging information without any agenda at all. Boring. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up this date, and we've got two people on a date, and they have an agenda. They have something that they want from the date. I want you to think big. Okay, what is his agenda? And it can't involve love or sex. All the men go, oh, what? Okay, so what is his agenda?
To impress.
Okay, bigger. What does he want from this date?
Borrow money.
What? To borrow money. Okay, he wants to borrow money. All right. What is her agenda? And it can't involve love or sex, and may I add, neither a free meal. Okay? All right? Okay, so what is her agenda? Think big. What does she want from this date? Yes?
She wants a good deal on a car.
Okay. He wants to borrow money. She wants a good deal on a car. Because of the context of this dating scene, the audience knows that. Can you see how much more interesting this date is already? Okay, now they're on a date, but the audience goes, oh, he wants to borrow money, but she wants a good deal on a car. So even if they exchange this mundane information, their agenda is going to be bubbling through. And that mundane conversation is going to be steered toward what they want eventually. So already it's more interesting. But let's say for a second that we add to it strategy, verbal strategy. Okay? So now we've got a guy who wants to borrow money, and so he uses lying to get it. And we've got a woman who wants a good deal on a car, and she uses flirting to get it. Or maybe he wants to borrow money, and he uses accusing to get it. And maybe she wants to get a good deal on a car, so she uses joking to get it. Okay? So not only this clash of agendas, But a clash of verbal strategies also makes dialogue-driven scenes more interesting. So what you want to do in your rewrite, go into your dialogue-driven scenes and figure out what your characters want from that scene and what is their verbal strategy that they're using toward getting it. Now, you probably find when you're watching dialogue-driven scenes that you like, these strategies change up, even in the middle of a scene. So remember, because if the strategy worked, that person would win. So sometimes they shift. They go from flirting to accusing. Okay, they go from joking to lying. It happens. Okay, and again, it's going to make your dialogue that much more interesting. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things in dialogue that sort of drive writers crazy because people give them notes about these things and they don't really know how to handle them. Okay? There's a phrase, okay, that's called on the nose, right? You guys have heard it. Somebody's probably at some point looked at one piece of dialogue that you liked and he said, oh, it's a little on the nose. Well, what does that mean, really? What do you think on the nose means?
Being too obvious.
Being too obvious. Okay. But again, sometimes we have to state the obvious. So what I find, when I find that scenes go on the nose, is when people are stating emotion out loud. Okay, and again, this goes with the idea of the truth. When people actually talk truthfully, it's really weird, okay? Because if a character came out and met another character and immediately said what was in their head, it would be strange. So if I'm stating emotion out loud and I say, wow, I am feeling a mixture of revulsion and attraction right now. Right? I'd be the crazy one. Now, my character might be thinking that, but as a civilized adult would know better than to say that. We all think things and feel things, but we don't say our emotions out loud. When someone states their emotions out loud, most likely that's when that character is going on the nose, and the writing is going on the nose. Okay? So, but again, you're in a dilemma because writers have to show emotion on screen in order to get the story pushing forward. So, how do you show that emotion without somebody stating the emotion? We're going to do something right now. We've got two characters, okay, and they are going to bump into each other, physically bump into each other. And you see this a lot on screen because what we're looking for is a really active meet, something that sort of makes characters literally collide. So they're going to bump into each other, and what is it that we always say, again, as civilized adults? What do we always say when we bump into somebody?
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry, right? And it's funny because, no matter what country I go to, it's always the same thing. It's the automatic response is an apology. I'm sorry. Now, do we always mean it?
No.
So now we have two characters. They're bumping into each other. And this guy's bumped into the other person. He says, I'm sorry. That's the line. But what does he wish he could say? Keep it clean. What does he wish he could say? What? Okay, why'd you hit me today? Somebody said?
Why don't you look where you're going?
Why don't you look where you're going? You're being so polite. Why'd you hit me? Why don't you look where you're going? All right, so he wishes he could say, why don't you look where you're going? But the line is, I'm sorry. So, how does he show it? What does he do as he says this line, I'm sorry, after bumping into this guy? What does he do to imply, why don't you look where you're going? Or to show the audience?
Like brush himself
Rolls
off.
his eyes. What else?
Like brush himself off.
He brushes himself off aggressively. What else does he do?
Brusque.
What?
Very brusque.
He's very brusque in his tone, but also physically. What does he do?
Snarls himself.
Shake his head.
Snarls, tight-lipped. What else?
Shake his head.
Shakes his head. Okay. He could muscle past. All these things as he says, "I'm sorry." Okay. All this sort of the snarling and the pushing and the brushing. All those things tell the audience, oh, he is mad. He doesn't like this guy at all. All right. Now, if you just said, I'm sorry, and there was no scene direction, then that piece of dialogue is flat. Okay? Now, what about, let's take a character and she bumps into somebody, but she doesn't want to say, look where you're going. She wants to say something positive. What does she want to say?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay. So she wants to say nice to meet you. And she says, I'm sorry. What does she do to show? Nice to meet you.
That's right.
She bats her eyes, because ladies do that, right? Okay, what else does she do?
She might grab a person's arm.
Okay, she might grab his arm. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, what else? Looks into his eyes. Okay, great. So now, it could be even interesting if they both have this sort of collision of feelings about each other. All right, so he's being brusque, and she's looking into his eyes. Right away, there's conflict, and now a scene about two people bumping into each other and saying, I'm sorry, and that's all they say, is a scene where they say so much more. So why are we talking about this when we're talking about dialogue? It's because you might have a scene where everybody's expressing what they really think out loud verbally. Well, that's on the nose. You're going to write what they wish they could say, or use that expression that you already have that's on the nose. That's what they wish they could say. Okay? And replace it with an action that shows what they wish they could say, that shows how they feel. And in this way, dialogue plus scene direction equals the moment. It equals the moment. You cannot have a class about dialogue without talking about scene direction. These action lines, that expresses the emotion, even if the dialogue sometimes cannot, because that would seem on the nose if it did. Okay. So that would definitely be my tip. Go through. What do they wish they could say? Cross it out and replace it with an activity. Now, I tend to call this activity a tell. Does anybody play poker here? Yeah? Okay, so what is a tell in poker?
It's a signal somebody gives off that tells kind of whether they're weak or they're strong.
Okay, it's a signal somebody gives off that tells whether they're weak or they're strong when they're playing cards, right? So you're trying not to show your hand, okay? But there's a tell. And what are these tells usually like?
They can be twitches, they can be a smile, they can be...
So they could be a twitch, they could be a smile, sometimes a small gesture. And think about a camera on screen, a camera that is watching your characters. It gets up really close. It picks up on every tell. Okay? So you can express this emotion without going all over the top with it. It's these little tells that the audience actually looks for. Another reason to be integrating the scene direction. And what I usually tell people in a rewrite pass is to look at their scenes and make sure that there is a key emotional tell per scene, so that the audience and the reader understands what just happened within the scene that affected somebody's emotions. That emotion is going to go into the next scene, and they're going to do something. They're going to act upon that emotion. And in that way, the story is going to progress. Make sense? So do a little tell pass. Sometimes you want to do this kind of pass and actually isolate your tell and get rid of all the busyness. Okay? Because sometimes it's actually burying the emotion. Okay? So if you have all this little character stuff, but there was one key tell and somebody missed it, get rid of some of the scene direction. Let the dialogue just play, and then hit us with that one key action line. Make sense? All right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about something else that writers are always struggling with. And it's this idea of voice. Voice. So you write like the smartest dialogue in the world. It's so clever. It makes everybody laugh in your writing group, and you have no idea why. When you turned it into a producer, the producer said, "Didn't sound like any of the voices were different. Yeah, it was clever, but everybody sounded the same." Ugh, what do you do, right? So here's a couple of things that you can do. And the first thing is to think about, where does this person come from? Okay, regionalisms. Right? When I was just traveling, I was in the UK, and I was in Ireland, and I was in Poland, and I would often ask them, you know, what does an American sound like? What if you were writing an American, what would you write? You know, and I got everything ranging from hiya to I'm so great. It's somewhere in between. You know, but you know, we know the regionalisms where we come from. We have expressions. Okay, anybody from the South here? Okay, what are some terms, some phrases that would be used?
Hi, y'all.
Hi, y'all. Okay. Is there another phrase that comes to mind? No? No? Do people call people by nickname?
Sometimes.
Sometimes? Okay. All right.
They also drop consonants. I mean, they drop letters.
Yes. Now, this is a difference between phrasing and dialect. When you start dropping letters like consonants, the read gets really weird and sometimes seems offensive. So that's why we're looking for the phrases, the regionalisms. I'm originally from Boston, okay? It took me years to find out that nobody except Bostonians say wicked. I found that out after saying wicked for 5 years after getting here, and people just looking at me like, nah. So, wicked is a phrase, right? It says where you're from. It's who you are, a little bit, okay? Okay.
One of the South, a lot of people say is have a good one.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
All right.
Not a good one. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. All right. So these little phrases of where you're from can all eke in. Now, so we all speak a language of where we're from, but we also speak the language of our profession. Okay? So, do you know anybody who speaks lawyer? Bet you do. Do you know anyone who speaks comic book geek? Okay, film nerd, right? You know somebody who speaks freshman in college? Does someone speak soccer mom? Okay, so the idea of language, what is your profession, what do you speak, can also come through. Okay, so now we've got regionalism and we have our profession actually creating language for us. And then finally, there's also verbal rules. Somebody mentioned cursing. Okay? Now cursing is a really shocking thing to read in dialogue. It's funny. It just suddenly kind of comes out at you because it's such a strong verbal rule. Okay? Do you guys remember Little Miss Sunshine? Okay, who was the guy who cursed? Grandpa. Grandpa had that rule, that verbal rule of cursing. And it was really funny because he was the only guy that did it. So he was always breaking the rules of whatever civilized society they were trying to be in at the time by cursing his way through the movie. And it was great. When everybody curses, everybody's basically playing the same instrument. Okay? So cursing, strong verbal rule. Give me another verbal rule. Anything come to mind? I'll start you off. Okay? People who speak in one-word sentences. Okay? You know those people? Just sort of clipped. Those yes, no. Okay? Those people. So that's a verbal rule too. Okay?
People
yes.
who don't finish their sentences.
People who speak in incomplete sentences. Sure. You know any ramblers? Okay? People who rant and ramble. That's a verbal rule. So you want to make sure that you're varying your voices with where they're from, what they do, and how they speak, which is that verbal rule that we were just talking about. Okay? And deciding all these things, even before you hit your pages, can really, really help. Okay, really help. Because that way you're channeling all of them and you're not going back in and rewriting every single piece of dialogue. It's just naturally coming to you. Now I'm going to give you one more tip about voice, and it's a little bit of a cheat. Not everybody agrees with me. So it is to actually cast in your head. If you were writing TV, you have the advantage of channeling these voices that have been cast for you. You hear them and you write them down. Okay? But for film, you don't have that advantage. So cast. Do your dream cast. Okay? With that dream voice in your head. So it could be somebody who isn't even around anymore. Okay? Marilyn Monroe could be that dream voice in your head. Okay? It could be Clint Eastwood at 20. Doesn't matter. Find a strong casting choice in your head, and suddenly, not only will how they talk change, but what they say will change significantly. Okay? So never do I want to read your pages and see that every character sounds the same. We've got a lot of ways in for that. So today we talked about changing voice, and we talked about avoiding being on the nose. And we talked about agenda and strategy, and I do have a little list for you, and I would like to just go over it as the very final thing that we do, okay? Here you go. Like a little top 10 list.
Do you find that some writers take some types of characteristics of dialogue and use them in character after character? And the reason I'm saying that is, if you remember the series Gilmore Girls,
I don't.
Lorelai, the producer of that show, or the writer of that show, she did a lot of dialogue, a lot of going on. And then she's also got a new show on ABC Family. It's called The Funheads, and the character in that one is almost exactly like Lorelai, Gilmore. And as far as the pattern of dialogue and how she handles it.
Well, I think yes. I think after a while, successful writers, you do start to understand how their approach is to dialogue. Not necessarily, I would think about it more positively than formulaic. I would think of it as that's their style, right? Everybody knows Sorkin's style, and it doesn't keep people away from his movies. Sometimes they're investing it to watch how these people verbally banter with each other and power play with each other.
Could it become expected of the writer?
Yes, it can become expected of the writer. We should all have this problem, right? All right, let's look at this list really quickly, and then I'm going to send you off. Okay, yeah. All right, great. So, first one, little top 10 list for dialogue. Come in late, leave early. I did not make that one up. It's just a really good screenwriting rule. I believe William Goldman said it. Cut the scene so that it begins on conflict and leaves on a question. In this way, you create verbal cliffhangers. Number 2, cut down monologues, please, unless it is the verbal rule of your character to rant and meander. This constant speech making does not help your script. Okay, remember, we're not listening to a movie, we're watching a movie. The best way to cut down your monologue, look at your monologue, pick one line that speaks to the essence of that speech. Circle it, that's your line. In class, what I have people do is actually rant through a monologue, and then I tell them to keep a line. And you'll be amazed, that perfect line is in there, and that's all that you need. Number 3, play verbal games. Remember, it's a power play, so you can sometimes literally play games. You can state the opposite, or talk backwards, or create riddles. Number 4, trade lines. At the end of a buddy movie or a romantic comedy, you noticed how sometimes people are speaking each other's catchphrases? Okay, you complete me. What that does is tell the audience, oh, they get each other. They listen to each other and they get each other. Number 5, show the subtext. We talked about that. Replace lines that state feelings with small actions that show feelings. Integrate scene direction into the conversation. Number 5, we talked about this as well, use the language of the character based on profession and stage of life. Incorporate your character's unique language, such as lawyer, college student, soccer mom, etc. Number 7, cut the chatter. For God's sakes, cut the chatter, please. Cut the greetings, cut the small talk, cut the verbal introductions. In life, we have to do this. In movies, we don't have to watch it, okay? Cut it, get to the meat of the scene. Turning the page here, number 8, eliminate static phone call scenes. At least create activity that keeps the camera moving. In the age of cell phone, people have started to get lazy again, believing that because somebody's walking around, the scene is interesting. But remember that that character is now just interacting with an object. Okay, so you still want to keep your phone call scenes to a minimum if you can. Or make it a set piece. Use the whole cell phone idea of traveling and talking, as something that is visually interesting and actually part of the scene. Number 9, put buttons on the end of the scene. So you guys know what I mean by that? It actually is just like it sounds, okay? A button. You are going to end your scenes with a strong line or even a strong line plus action that sort of brings home that scene, seals it up, but also makes us want to know more. And then finally, number 10, just as we started out, remember your character's agenda and strategy. Know what your character wants and how he or she intends to get it with that verbal strategy. Think you learned a little bit today? Yeah? Go home and rewrite your dialogue. It has been a pleasure.